How to Build a Multi-Billion-Dollar Business from Scratch by Strive Masiyiwa, compiled by Geoffrey Tengamba, being read to you by Arnold Rangakuramya. Chapter 18, The Ego in the Storm. Crisis is often how great innovation begins. When the going gets tough, don't give up on new growth. Brace yourself, there is a storm on its way. The new year opened with turmoil in the Chinese stock markets as prices fell dramatically, leading to a global sell-off. In just 1 week, global stock markets lost over 2 trillion United States dollars. Other news in the global market saw the price of a barrel of crude oil fall below $35 per barrel, down from a high of $62 per barrel less than 12 months ago. That's down 50% in 12 months and 71% in 24 months. Since the beginning of last year, 2015, the price of copper has fallen by 30%. Iron ore is down by 42%. Platinum has also been a disaster, losing more than half its value from less than 3 years ago. Agricultural commodities have not fared much better on global markets. Last week, the South African rand hit an all-time low of 16 to 1 against the United States dollar, and it's still falling. Your small business in Harare, Lagos or Nairobi may not have anything to do with China or with any commodity like oil, iron ore or platinum. So you might be asking yourself, what's this got to do with me? Well, the answer is everything. It has everything to do with you, and its impact is going to be very personal. Brace yourself, there's a storm on its way. You might even be sitting on your desk as a civil servant or supervising children at school as a teacher or upholding the law as a policeman, or maybe you're a pensioner and you're also saying to yourself, I'm not in business, I don't know anything about these things, so what's it got to do with me? The answer is everything. It has everything to do with you, and its impact is going to be very personal. Brace yourself, there is a storm on the way. You look at the sky and see rolling black clouds, the wind is picking up, and you say to yourself, a big storm is on the way. Even though rain isn't yet falling, you know the signs of a heavy rainstorm, that you must button things down and secure yourself properly. Or maybe you're one of the millions on the continent today suffering from another rainless sky for months on end, putting your fields, crops, livestock, perhaps your whole life at risk. These are signs in weather conditions. Those who are experienced in such things can usually say with a degree of certainty that a storm is coming. However, if you do not understand these matters or you blissfully decide to ignore them, you will suffer a serious drenching or worse. In business economics, we also have signs. We are seeing these warning signs right now. They are not any different from the black clouds and the wind or the clear sky and the drought. They are all linked. The stock markets of China and the New York may seem far away, and global commodity prices and exchange rates may seem irrelevant to your village, but they are linked to the real economy in which you live and work. The next 12 months or more will be very tough, particularly in emerging markets. Many African countries will find it hard going. Consequently, it will be tough for citizens, especially those who are most vulnerable. The weaker your country's economy going into the storm, the tougher it will be. Similarly, the weaker your company or employer, the tougher it will be. There is a storm. Now let me tell you about the flight of the eagle. Prophets and kings of the Bible world absolutely loved watching this majestic bird. They believed the eagle is the only bird that flies during a storm. It's developed a flying technique, a skill they call mounting the wind, as though it were climbing a stairway. The eagle has so mastered the storm that it not only flies during storms but can find opportunities to prosper. It can actually use the storm to its advantage. Even in these storms, those with the correct mindset will prepare themselves. They will train themselves to understand the times and learn to prosper in its headwinds. They will mount on wings as eagles. Yes, it's going to be very tough, and for some of you, tougher than anything you could ever have imagined. But you must not be discouraged or wearied. And when you come through it, you will be much better at what you do. Just don't be afraid and don't panic. This year we must be serious. Very serious. Africa expects it of us. Changing our wealth creation model. Ever since I started school, my teachers taught me that our country was rich because we had many minerals and we would recite the list of minerals. By the time I finished secondary school, I not only knew my country was rich, but that Africa itself was rich because we had so many natural resources. Even though I didn't study geology, I could almost tell you where all these precious minerals and other resources were found. Oil, diamonds, platinum, gold, copper, in places like Congo. They were names of some things I couldn't even pronounce. Yes, Africa is so rich. As a young student, I thought about what the global buyers of Africa's natural resources then did with them. It was only if ever a superficial thought, but I soon realized something didn't add up. Sometimes it almost seemed that the richer a country, the poorer the people. But how could this be? 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. My primary school teacher drummed that into my head, right? Then I got to secondary school, and one day the teacher came in and said, you know, there are situations when 1 plus 1 does not always add up to 2. I'm here to talk about mathematics, the teacher said. It's time to put away the arithmetic. This is senior school. Senior school? I did end my study of mathematics in secondary school. I also studied it at university where I majored in engineering. What was it the Apostle Paul said about putting away childish things? Let me return to the wealth of our nations. I left university in the early 1980s. In those days. It was not China that was rising into an economic giant. It was Japan. It was rising and overtaking every European country until Japan was second only to America. It was so spectacular. I first met a Japanese person when I was in my 20s and already working. Yet I read every single book I could find about their prowess. Tell me about the minerals in your country, I asked my Japanese friend. We have no minerals to talk of, he said emphatically and proudly. What do you mean you don't have minerals? As we talked about the Japanese rise, I was reminded of my lessons in mathematics, and so I discovered it was possible for a nation to be rich without minerals. We buy your minerals as cheaply as we can, then we turn them into high-value products. You mean you exploit us? That's not the way we see it. After all, what would you do with them if we didn't buy them? Do you know what we do with your platinum or oil? Then he added, our wealth creation model as a nation is not based on raw materials and minerals. Wealth creation model? What do you mean, wealth creation model? Deeply troubled, even insulted initially, I knew there was something more to learn if I avoided becoming emotional. The conclusions I reached changed the way I look at wealth and totally empowered me. It changed my mindset. The tent maker once said that our greatest battle is always in our minds, changing the way we see things, particularly if we have held on to a certain perspective for a long time. I hope it will do the same for you. Imagining new wealth creation models. The talk with my Japanese friend had left me thinking deeply about how we in Africa think about wealth creation. Maybe, just maybe, there was another way to think about it. Imagine if my teachers had told me that we are very rich because we produce some of the smartest entrepreneurs in Africa. People with the know-how and the vision to transform our minerals into such great innovations and products that we no longer export our raw materials all over the world. From then on, every time I visited a country or even a major city and watched its economic activity, particularly places doing well, I would reflect on its wealth creation model. Imagine a wealth creation model that doesn't require any raw material endowment like Silicon Valley or Singapore. I was fascinated by countries that rise without necessarily being underpinned by minerals and the exploitation of raw materials. Dubai, Mauritius, Singapore, South Korea, Switzerland, to name but a few. I was also fascinated by countries where consumers can buy domestically processed and finished products, value-added goods created from their own raw materials. I imagined Nigeria, which turned its oil into plastics, fertilizers, sports equipment, cosmetics, deodorants, and toothpaste. It's good to have oil and platinum, and to grow cocoa and coffee. But for citizens to benefit from a nation's natural resources, it's critical to have the best stewardship and to eliminate corruption. Without a culture of respect for the rule of law, all future wealth creation models are doomed to failure. The bottom line is we can no longer allow our national economies to be underpinned solely by the export of raw materials. If we are not careful, we can even become dangerously addicted to them, such that African nations, workers, and citizens in general are forced to endure endless boom and bust cycles. When the price of oil is up, we are doing well. When it goes down, we are scrambling. Copper, platinum, boom, boom, bust. It's happening now. We must prioritize the development of innovative capacity to redeploy our rich natural resources within our own economies. It goes beyond the simplicity of processing the so-called benefiction. That's not enough. We must also pay attention to emerging technologies and how they are likely to affect the business we are familiar with today. My appeal to this generation is to get us out of a wealth creation model underpinned by export of natural resources. We can no longer afford to think of the wealth creation of our nations in terms of mineral and raw material exports. Not when we know that there is a Silicon Valley. Not when you know that Apple Computers Incorporated is worth almost the same as Nigeria's and Angola's combined GDP. Not when you're the generation that knows about Alibaba, Tencent, Uber, and Skype. As we see the price of oil, copper, and platinum plummet, let's stop and take a deep breath and say to ourselves, it's time to change our wealth creation model. Within the next 25 years, we must break our addiction to resource-driven economic wealth. It's time to turn to our African inventors and innovators and entrepreneurs. Protect the root of your business. A young man and his father were watching a huge fire coming down from the hills towards their family vineyard. At first, the young man tried to organize buckets of water, but it was clear that the fire would engulf everything and consume the vineyard. Then, to his surprise, he saw the old man pick up an axe and run towards the vines. Systematically, he began to cut the vines, leaving only the roots. We must protect the root, my dear son. Do as I show you. And with this, they saved a business that was several generations old. Every business has got a root, and you must know that root. You must be able to protect that root when things are tough. Sometimes protecting that root looks cruel, but you must protect it at all costs. Sometimes it can come down to reducing activity to the bare minimum with just a handful of staff. Your most valuable resource will always be good people. There is no successful entrepreneur who does not know what I'm talking about. It may well be one of the most difficult things you'll ever do. Stay very clear about who you are and what business you're in. Don't underestimate the crisis. Make sure you're looking at credible data. Manage with grace under pressure. Review and revise your game plan as needed. Acknowledge which plans aren't working. Decide what you need to do in order to get what you want to go. Tackle the problem systematically. Don't throw kerosene into the fire. Don't get distracted. Make the tough decisions that you need to without delay. One bucket of water won't save a hectare of crisis. Seek and value professional advice. Don't be afraid to try something new. Crisis is often how great innovation begins. When the going gets tough, don't give up on new growth. Lead with courage and vision, even if your heart is sad. Don't panic, pray and plan. If you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. There is a story told about a businessman who went to see a close and trusted friend. Things are so tough, he began to say. I feel I'm in a deep hole and every day it just seems to get deeper. Tell me the problem, the other man asked sympathetically. Everyone is against me, his friend said emphatically. Then he began to list all the people who had undermined him and wanted to take over his company. It was a pretty impressive list. After a while, his friend chipped in. It appears almost everyone is trying to destroy you. Absolutely! He continued to give more detail of the people and the things that had conspired to undermine his business. So what are you going to do? His friend finally asked. I shall fight and fight. The friend listened and then gave his advice. I notice, as you were speaking, that you yourself do not believe that you have contributed in any way to this situation, right? No, I have not contributed in any way at all. I see. So what will you do? That is why I've come to you for help. I need to borrow some money to see me through this problem for the next few weeks. The friend then politely declined to give the man any assistance. I personally would not help such a person. Do you know why? If you find yourself in a hole for whatever reason, the first thing you must do is to stop digging and making the hole bigger. People who refuse to accept responsibility for any situation they are in will only make the situation worse by the actions they take. If you have a problem to solve in a business, don't get distracted by looking for scapegoats or trying to mobilize political support against perceived enemies. This is why many state-owned enterprises find it so difficult to solve business problems. If you want others to help you, you must first stop digging. Let go of the shovel and allow a trusted someone to give you a hand up. To move forward, you must dust yourself off and analyze honestly how you got yourself into that hole. While you may feel a bit defeated, don't just drown your sorrows with a drink or other destructive and time-wasting habits. An ego in a storm must be alert for danger and opportunity at all times, not at risk of slamming into a cliff or falling into a different kind of hole. What is the Japanese proverb? Fall down 7 times, stand up 8. You need to develop relationships with people based on trust. The other day I was in New York and decided to attend a church service with a dear friend of more than 20 years, Dr. A.R. Bernard of Christian Cultural Center. During the service, they showed a video called the marshmallow test. Young children were put in a room with a marshmallow, a type of sweet, and told them that if they didn't eat it, they would get an extra one when the adult returned. Left alone, the children then had to manage their impulse to simply grab the sweet and eat it. Many of them managed to control themselves and so earned the extra sweet. However, experts found that those children who had previously been let down by an adult ate the sweet immediately. Some of the children in the marshmallow test just don't value the promise made by the adult because they had been betrayed by adults before. So what has this got to do with our theme about surviving tough times? The ego in the storm. Everything. Getting through tough times will depend on how many relationships you have built up based on trust. When people trust you, it's possible to get a helping hand during tough times. Some children were willing to wait because they trusted the adult who had made a promise to them. Asking other people to wait or make sacrifices depends to a great extent on how much people believe they can trust you based on previous conduct, particularly when you seem to be the one with the upper hand. As a matter of principle, you must build relationships with employees, partners, investors, and customers based on trust. It's important to be known as a person of integrity. I've already written a great deal about respect for the rule of law. This is about respect for yourself as a person of moral character. You must establish your track record as an honorable person when times are good. There is no point in showing humility only when things get tough. You must be trustworthy when you're flying high. If during the good times you and your family were splashing money around like there is no tomorrow, you'll find it difficult to call on others to make sacrifices. If you were never willing to pay your creditors, there is never an excuse for this. You'll find it difficult, if not impossible, to secure credit during the tough times. If you broke agreements with impunity because you were powerful, no one will stand with you when it's you who needs help. Who do you know who really trusts you? Who is out there that will stand up for you? Real trust transcends your ability to go to members of your family, your clan, your tribe, your religion, your nationality, or even your race. When you sit down to reflect upon this issue, consider how many people from outside your comfort circle of family, clan, tribe, race, religion would consider you trustworthy. This is the marshmallow test for each one of us every day. In Christianity, it's the real interpretation of the parable of the Good Samaritan. Personally, one of the greatest testimonies of my life is the number of people who have stood in my corner when I needed help. It never ceases to amaze me how far people are prepared to stand in my corner. It's called unmerited favor. and a blessing for which I am very grateful. There are almost people out there who will try to give almost anything to help out when they are in trouble. Do all you can every day to reach out to other people and build trust. Be a person of your word, your character. As a person of integrity is far more important than any money in the bank, fancy car, or anything material in your life. End of chapter 18.